Audio Jungle. 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 Audio Jungle.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Just a quick introduction to what I want to play for you. Just a brief little video that I just think you're going to enjoy. Been listening to a lot of the prophets lately. If you're like me and many millions of others across this country that were distraught over the election fraud debacle, I personally haven't stopped praying that God would intervene. And a lot of the prophets, and I say many of them, are doubling down on the idea that God is going to intervene and that He is going to rescue our nation from the destruction that the current administration is trying to do to us. But I ran across this video. Some of you may be familiar with Pastor Hank Kunneman. If you're not, you're going to love him. This little bitty clip is part of a 1-hour message that was just amazing. But this particular part was so hilarious to me that I just had to share it with you. And this is Pastor Hank Kunneman, prophet, at his very best. Hope you enjoy it. God bless.
Let's go to the next point for the sake of time. In the next point of the days of Noah, I have it as number 14. In the days of Noah, God remembered his prophet Noah. In other words, his man stood the test of time, the test of the prophecy, with no time frame given. God, though, in the end, honored the man that was scoffed, persecuted, called false, probably threatened, right? And yet the man held on for 120 years to what God said to him. But in the end, God honored him. Look at Genesis 8, verses 1 through 2. And God remembered Noah. That's the first thing God said. God will ultimately honor what He said. We may not understand it. We may not know when. But God ultimately honored Noah. Now, here's what you have to understand from this point. Noah stood for 120 years. Let me ask you a question. You in this room and you that are watching, where do you stand? And what are you standing for? So let's talk about a Bible story, boys and girls. Facebook, this is a Bible story. In the Bible, in 1 Kings chapter 1, in our Bible story today, there was a son of David named Adonijah. And Adonijah in our Bible story was a very handsome-looking man. Now, unlike what you might think today, but he was a handsome man. And he decided to raise himself up in our Bible story to be a self-appointed, fraudulent presidential candidate. Or in our Bible story, he was a king. And so he raised himself up And he went to the masses and convinced them to vote for him and to agree with them. And he took their fraudulent agreement. And there was corruption that was happening in the nation of Israel in our Bible story with a fraudulent king who raised himself up. And he was not anointed, he was not appointed, and he was not even the one of the Lord's choosing. In our Bible story, though, he even decided to gather some prophets to his side and get them to concede. And in our Bible story, to get them to side with him. And in this story, even to begin to give an appraise and an honoring of a title and an office and a position that didn't exist. Oftentimes, like in our Bibles where it says, pray for those in places of authority. Well, you should pray for people and you should pray for what is happening. But remember, is it according to the office and the title that was given? Adonijah in our Bible story, it was him that gave the title and raised himself up and gathered the masses through the media at that time to also be a part of what became, in the Bible story, a very fraudulent circus. And it almost looked like in modern day history, inauguration. But in our Bible story, it was a celebration. It went all over town. It was a parade. And it really, in our Bible story, in 1 Kings 1, was a puppet show. But yet, in our story of Adonijah from the Bible Facebook, the prophets went over to his side and conceded. So did some ministers and even the people. But yet something was happening. God was not happy in our Bible story because he didn't choose King Adonijah / President Adonijah. And what he was doing, even though it looked like it was an inauguration, it was a self-appointed circus. But God was over in our Bible story choosing a guy that liked the number 45 and was over named Solomon. He was a very wise leader, appointed by God and anointed by God. You have to know where you stand. So let's look at our Bible story. In verse 8, these stood with the one that God chose, not the self-appointed king. Notice Zadok. He was a righteous minister. Ministers in the Bible story, righteous ministers knew where to stand. In our Bible story, Benaniah became a powerful general in David's army. In our Bible story, Benaniah is an intercessor type person. And so you could say intercessors knew who to pray for, side with, get behind, not the fake of Adonijah, but this guy whom God had put the anointing on that people didn't like and didn't like the way that he would tweet and say things in Jerusalem. And so next, the true prophets, Nathan the prophet in our Bible story, stayed with where and could discern what the Lord said and what the Lord was doing because they understood the future. And also the mighty men, which belonged to David, they also had a heart for God. They were not with King President Adonijah. And it's okay to not always side with what is self-appointed and evil and does not carry the Lord's blessing when it's done in a fraudulent way. That is our Bible story today, boys and girls.